At 18, she was fired and fainted from hunger. But the man who helped her was the millionaire owner of the building. I love knowing where you're all from. Subscribe, leave a like, and tell me where you're watching from. The morning sun filtered through the grimy windows of the cafeteria on Rue de la Paix, casting pale golden stripes across the worn linoleum floor. Isabella Brown moved between the tables with mechanical precision, her thin frame barely casting a shadow as she collected empty cups and crumpled napkins. At 18, she looked both younger and older than her years, younger in the fragility of her movements, older in the weariness that lived behind her dark eyes. She had not eaten anything substantial in 2 days. The leftover croissant she had saved from yesterday's shift had been her dinner, and breakfast had been nothing but tap water and hope. Her stomach twisted with hunger, but she had learned to ignore it, the way she had learned to ignore so many other discomforts in her short life. Isabella, the sharp voice of Madame Beaumont, the cafeteria manager, cut through the ambient noise of clattering dishes and morning conversation. Table 12 needs clearing. What are you doing, dreaming? Yes, madame. Right away. Isabella's voice was barely audible, a whisper of compliance that had become her default tone. She hurried toward table 12, her vision swimming slightly at the edges. The dizziness had been coming and going all morning, but she could not afford to show weakness. Not today. Not ever. She had been living in Lyon for 3 months now, having fled her small hometown of Beaumont-sur-Loire after her mother's death. There had been nothing left for her there, except memories of a childhood marked by poverty and her mother's endless sacrifices. Her father had disappeared before Isabella could form memories of him, leaving behind only an absence that shaped her mother into someone both fierce and broken. When her mother died of pneumonia, a death that could have been prevented with proper medical care they could not afford, Isabella had packed her few belongings into a single worn suitcase and boarded a bus to Lyon. The city had seemed to promise something her small town never could: anonymity, opportunity, escape. But Lyon had proven to be just as harsh as anywhere else, perhaps more so. Without family connections, without education beyond the basics, without money or references, she had struggled to find work. The cafeteria job at the Beaumont building, an imposing structure of glass and steel in the business district, had been a miracle, or so she had thought when Madame Beaumont hired her 6 weeks ago. The pay was minimal, barely enough to cover the rent for the tiny room she shared with 2 other girls in a crumbling building on the city's outskirts. After rent and the metro fare to get to work, she had almost nothing left for food. She had lost weight she could not afford to lose, her uniform hanging loose on her narrow shoulders. "This coffee is cold." A businessman in an expensive suit looked up at her with irritation as she approached table 12. "I asked for it hot. Can you people not do anything right?" "I'm sorry, sir. I'll get you a fresh cup immediately." Isabella reached for the offending cup, but her hand trembled. The edges of her vision darkened momentarily, and she had to grip the edge of the table to steady herself. "Are you ill?" The man's irritation shifted to something that might have been concern or might have been disgust. "You look terrible." "I'm fine, sir. Just a moment." But she was not fine. As she turned toward the kitchen, the floor seemed to tilt beneath her feet. She took one step, then another, and then the world tilted completely. The last thing Isabella remembered was the sound of breaking porcelain as the cup slipped from her fingers, and then darkness swallowed everything. She woke to the sensation of something cool against her forehead and a voice speaking quietly somewhere above her. The world came back in fragments, the harsh fluorescent lights of an unfamiliar ceiling, the scent of expensive cologne mixing with the antiseptic smell of a first aid kit, and the realization that she was lying on a leather sofa in what appeared to be an office. "Easy now, don't try to sit up too quickly." The voice was male, calm, and carried an authority that expected to be obeyed. Isabella's eyes focused slowly on the man kneeling beside the sofa, a man whose face would have been at home on a magazine cover. Dark hair touched with silver at the temples, sharp features softened by genuine concern, and eyes the color of storm clouds that studied her with an intensity that made her want to look away. "Where am I?" Her voice came out as a croak. "My office. You fainted in the cafeteria downstairs. I was there for my morning coffee when it happened." He moved back slightly, giving her space. "I'm Noah Wilson. I own this building." Isabella's heart sank. Of course. Of all the people to witness her collapse, it had to be the building's owner. She tried to sit up, panic overriding her weakness. "I'm so sorry, Monsieur Wilson. I didn't mean to cause a scene. I should get back to work." "You should absolutely not get back to work." His tone was firm but not unkind. He stood, moving to a small refrigerator in the corner of the office. "When did you last eat?" The question, asked so directly, stripped away her ability to construct a polite lie. "Yesterday morning." He turned to look at her, and something in his expression shifted. Not pity. Isabella had learned to recognize pity, and this was something different. Understanding, perhaps, or recognition. Yesterday morning, and before that? The day before. She looked down at her hands, thin and pale against the dark fabric of her uniform. "I ran out of money until payday." Noah Wilson was silent for a moment. Then he opened the refrigerator and pulled out a sandwich, an apple, and a bottle of water. He brought them to the coffee table beside the sofa and set them down. "Eat slowly." "I can't accept." "It's not charity. It's common sense. You work in my building, and I can't have employees fainting from hunger. Eat." The sandwich was roast beef with fresh vegetables on artisan bread, the kind of sandwich that cost more than she usually spent on food in 2 days. Isabella's hands shook as she unwrapped it, and despite his instruction to eat slowly, she had to force herself not to devour it. The first bite was almost painful, her stomach cramping with the sudden introduction of substantial food. Noah had moved to his desk, apparently giving her privacy to eat without being watched. But Isabella caught him glancing over a few times, his expression thoughtful. His office was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The furniture was modern and expensive, the art on the walls, the kind she had only seen in museums. This was a man who lived in a completely different world from hers. "How old are you?" he asked after a few minutes. 18, sir." 18. He repeated the word as if it explained something. "And you're here in Lyon alone?" "Yes, sir." "No family?" "No, sir. My mother died 3 months ago. There's no one else." Something flickered across his face, a shadow of old pain that matched her own. "I'm sorry for your loss." The words were simple, but there was a weight to them that suggested he understood what loss meant. Isabella nodded, not trusting her voice. She finished the sandwich and the apple, drank half the water, and felt almost human again. The dizziness had receded, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion that was familiar. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I'll pay you back for the food." "You'll do no such thing." Noah stood and moved to the windows, looking out over the city. "Tell me about your job. Do you like working in the cafeteria?" It was such an absurd question that Isabella almost laughed. Did anyone like working minimum-wage jobs that barely kept them alive? But she sensed he was asking something deeper. "It's honest work. Madame Beaumont gave me a chance when no one else would." Madame Beaumont. His tone was neutral, but something in it made Isabella nervous. "How does she treat you?" Isabella hesitated. The truth was that Madame Beaumont was harsh, quick to criticize and slow to praise. She docked pay for minor infractions and seemed to take pleasure in making her employees feel small. But it was still a job, and jobs were precious. "She runs a tight operation." Noah turned to look at her, and those storm-grey eyes seemed to see right through her diplomatic answer. "I see." There was a knock at the door, and Madame Beaumont herself entered without waiting for permission. Her expression was a mixture of anger and anxiety. "Monsieur Wilson, I apologize for the disturbance. This girl has been nothing but trouble since I hired her. I'll have her removed from the premises immediately." "That won't be necessary." Noah's voice had cooled by several degrees. "In fact, Madame Beaumont, I'd like to discuss with you why one of your employees is so malnourished that she fainted from hunger during her shift." Madame Beaumont's face reddened. That is hardly my responsibility, monsieur. If she cannot manage her personal finances on the wages you pay, I think we both know that the cafeteria workers in this building are paid barely above minimum wage. When was Isabella's last performance review? She's only been here 6 weeks. Then let's conduct one now. Isabella, he turned to her, you're fired from the cafeteria. The words hit her like a physical blow. Fired. She was being fired. The room spun again, and this time it had nothing to do with hunger. Without this job, she had nothing. She would not be able to pay rent. She would end up on the streets, all because she had been too weak, too hungry, too broken to hide it properly. However, Noah continued, his eyes still on hers, I'm offering you a different position. My executive assistant recently left to have a baby, and I need someone to help manage my schedule and correspondence. The pay is considerably better, and the position comes with meal vouchers for the executive dining room. The question is, are you interested? Isabella stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. But I have no experience, no qualifications. I don't even have proper education. You're articulate, you're honest, and you showed up for work even when you were starving. That suggests reliability and dedication. The rest can be learned. He moved to his desk and pulled out a business card, writing something on the back. Take the weekend to think about it. Come see me Monday morning at 8 if you're interested. Either way, here's an advance on your first week's salary. He handed her an envelope along with the card. Isabella opened it with shaking hands and nearly gasped. It contained more money than she made in 2 weeks at the cafeteria. I can't. You can and you will. Consider it compensation for the medical emergency you suffered on my property. His tone brooked no argument. Madame Beaumont, you're dismissed, and you can expect a visit from HR regarding wage compliance in the cafeteria. Madame Beaumont left in a fury, slamming the door behind her. Isabella sat on the sofa, clutching the envelope, unable to believe what had just happened. She looked up at Noah Wilson, this stranger who had just changed the entire trajectory of her life, and saw him watching her with an expression she could not quite read. Why? She whispered. Why would you do this for someone you don't even know? For a long moment, he did not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of old ghosts. Because I know what it's like to be 18 and alone and hungry, and because someone once gave me a chance when I needed it most. Now go home, Isabella Brown. Rest, eat, and decide if you're brave enough to take a chance on something better. As Isabella left the office and made her way home through the afternoon streets of Lyon, she clutched the envelope like a lifeline. For the first time in months, perhaps for the first time in her life, she felt the stirring of something she had almost forgotten existed. Hope. The weekend passed in a blur of surreal disbelief. Isabella used part of the money Noah Wilson had given her to buy groceries, real groceries, not just cheap bread and instant noodles. She sat in the cramped kitchen of her shared apartment, eating a proper meal while her roommates chattered around her, and felt tears sliding down her cheeks. When Amélie, the older of her 2 roommates, asked what was wrong, Isabella could only shake her head. How could she explain that she was crying because for the first time in months her stomach was full? She spent Saturday resting, something she had not allowed herself to do in so long that she had forgotten what it felt like. Her body ached as it began to recover from the accumulated exhaustion of malnutrition and overwork. Sunday, she used some of the money to buy proper clothes, a simple black skirt, a white blouse, and a pair of shoes that actually fit. Nothing expensive, but professional enough for an office environment. Monday morning found her standing outside the Beaumont building at 7:45, clutching her small handbag and fighting the urge to run away. What if this was all an elaborate joke? What if Noah Wilson had changed his mind? What if she failed and proved him wrong for taking a chance on her? But she thought of her mother, who had worked herself to exhaustion cleaning houses to keep Isabella fed and clothed. Her mother had never given up, never stopped fighting. Isabella owed it to that memory to be equally brave. She entered the building and took the elevator to the top floor. The executive level was a different world from the cafeteria basement, all glass and steel and hushed efficiency, A receptionist looked up as Isabella approached. "I'm here to see Monsieur Wilson," Isabella said, pleased that her voice did not shake. "My name is Isabella Brown. I have an 8 o'clock appointment." The receptionist's professional smile warmed slightly. "Ah, yes. Monsieur Wilson mentioned you'd be coming. He's expecting you. Third door on the right." Isabella walked down the corridor, her new shoes quiet on the thick carpet. She knocked on Noah's door, and his voice called out for her to enter. He stood by the windows again, as if that was his natural habitat. Looking out over the city he seemed to command. He turned as she entered, and she saw approval in his expression as he took in her professional appearance. "You came," he said simply. "Yes, sir. I'm not certain I'm the right person for this position, but I'm willing to work harder than anyone else you could hire." A slight smile touched his lips. "Honesty. Good. That's the most important qualification for this job. Honesty and discretion. Sit down, Isabella. Let's discuss what this position actually entails." For the next hour, he walked her through his business operations. Noah Wilson, she learned, was not just wealthy. He was a self-made multimillionaire who had built his fortune from nothing. He owned commercial properties across France, invested in technology startups, and ran a private foundation that funded educational programs for underprivileged youth. "I grew up in the foster system," he told her matter-of-factly. "Bounced from home to home until I aged out at 18 with nothing but the clothes I wore and a chip on my shoulder. I was angry at the world, convinced that success was only for people born into the right families." Isabella found herself leaning forward, captivated. This was not the story she had expected from a man who owned buildings and wore suits that cost more than her entire wardrobe. "What changed?" she asked softly. "A woman named Marie Dubois. She ran a community center in the neighborhood where I was sleeping rough. She saw something in me, God knows what, and she refused to let me waste it. She got me into a vocational program, helped me get my first real job, taught me that my past did not have to define my future." His expression grew distant. "She died 5 years ago. Cancer. I was holding her hand in the hospital when she told me that the way to honor her was to do for others what she had done for me." The silence that followed was heavy with shared understanding. They were both orphans, both shaped by loss, both carrying the weight of grief for the people who had loved them and left them too soon. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel sorry for me," Noah continued. "I'm telling you because I want you to understand why I offered you this job. I see myself in you, Isabella. That hunger, not just for food, but for something more. For a chance to prove that you're worth more than the circumstances life handed you." Isabella felt something crack open in her chest, a wall she had built so carefully around her heart. "I won't let you down," she whispered. "I know you won't. Now let's get started. Your first task is to organize this disaster." He gestured to his desk, which was indeed covered with papers, files, and sticky notes. "My temporary assistant lasted 3 days before she fled in tears. Think you can handle it?" Isabella stood and walked to the desk, assessing the chaos with a critical eye. It was daunting, but no more daunting than surviving on the streets of Lyon had been. "I can handle it." "Good. I'll be in meetings most of the day. There's a laptop set up for you at that desk." He pointed to a smaller desk positioned near the windows. "Password is on a note in the drawer. Email me if you have questions. Oh, and lunch is at noon in the executive dining room. Use the meal vouchers I mentioned." He grabbed his suit jacket and headed for the door, then paused. "Isabella, welcome to the team." After he left, Isabella stood in the middle of the magnificent office, surrounded by luxury she had never imagined occupying, and let out a long breath. Then she rolled up her sleeves and got to work. The chaos on Noah's desk was not as insurmountable as it had first appeared. It was simply the accumulation of a busy man who had been too long without proper assistance. Isabella created piles: urgent, important, routine, and filing. She opened his email account and felt her eyes widen at the hundreds of unread messages. No wonder he needed help. She spent the morning sorting, prioritizing, and organizing. The work was challenging, but satisfying in a way the cafeteria job had never been. Here, she could see the direct impact of her efforts. Each email answered, each file organized, each appointment confirmed, brought order to chaos. At noon, she took the elevator to the executive dining room. It was nothing like the cafeteria where she had worked. White tablecloths, fresh flowers, and food that looked like it belonged in a restaurant. Isabella chose a simple salad and soup, still not quite comfortable with the luxury of choice. She ate alone, observing the other executives and assistants who filled the room. They all looked so confident, so comfortable in this world. Isabella wondered if she would ever feel like she belonged here. "You must be Isabella." A woman in her 50s approached with a warm smile. "I'm Francine Leroy. I work in HR. Noah mentioned you'd be starting today." "Yes, madame, it's my first day. Please, call me Francine." "May I join you?" Over lunch, Francine explained the building's operations, introduced Isabella to the meal voucher system, and gave her practical advice about working for Noah. "He's demanding but fair," Francine said. "He expects excellence, but he also recognizes and rewards it, and he's generous with second chances, though he rarely needs to give them. People who work for Noah tend to rise to meet his expectations." "He took a chance on me," Isabella admitted. "I don't have any experience with this kind of work." Francine's smile was knowing. "Noah has good instincts about people. If he hired you, it's because he saw something worth nurturing. Don't prove him wrong." The afternoon flew by as Isabella continued organizing Noah's affairs. She created a filing system, set up a priority system for emails, and drafted responses to routine inquiries for his approval. By the time Noah returned at 5:30, his desk was clear and organized, his inbox manageable, and Isabella had a typed summary of everything that required his immediate attention. He stopped in the doorway, staring at his transformed office. "Did you actually leave for lunch? Or have you been working straight through?" "I took lunch, sir. Francine from HR was kind enough to join me and explain some of the systems." Noah moved to his desk, picking up the summary sheet she had prepared. He read it carefully, and Isabella held her breath. Had she missed something? Made some terrible error? "This is exceptional work," he said finally. "You prioritized exactly as I would have. These responses to routine emails are perfect. Isabella, are you certain you've never done this kind of work before?" Relief flooded through her. "Never, sir. I just tried to think about what would be most helpful." "Well, whatever you're doing, keep doing it." He sat down at his desk, and for the first time since she had met him, he looked relaxed. "Go home. You've earned it. And Isabella, thank you. This is the first time in months I've looked at my desk without feeling overwhelmed." As Isabella gathered her things, Noah spoke again. "One more thing. I'm going to need you to attend a charity gala with me this Saturday. Not as a date," he added quickly, seeing her expression. "As my assistant. I need someone to help manage the evening, keep track of conversations and commitments I make. It's part of the job. Is that something you're comfortable with?" A charity gala. Isabella had never been to anything remotely like that, but she remembered her promise to herself, to be brave, to match her mother's fighting spirit. "Yes, sir, I can do that." "Good. We'll go shopping for appropriate attire on Thursday." "My treat. It's a business expense." Isabella wanted to protest, but the look on his face told her it would be futile. Besides, she had nothing remotely suitable for a gala. "Thank you, sir." "Noah," he corrected gently. "When it's just us, you can call me Noah. Sir makes me feel like I'm 100 years old." "Thank you, Noah." Walking home that evening, Isabella felt like she was floating. The work had been challenging, but fulfilling. Noah Wilson was demanding but kind. And for the first time since her mother's death, she felt like she had a purpose beyond mere survival. That night, as she lay in her narrow bed listening to the city sounds outside her window, Isabella thought about the strange turn her life had taken. 5 days ago, she'd been fainting from hunger in a cafeteria basement. Now, she was the executive assistant to one of Lyon's wealthiest men, preparing to attend a charity gala. It felt like a fairy tale, But fairy tales were not real, and Isabella knew better than to trust in happily ever afters. She would work hard, prove her worth, and save every euro she could, because the one thing life had taught her was that security was an illusion, and the only person she could truly rely on was herself. Still, as she drifted off to sleep, she allowed herself a small smile. Maybe fairy tales were not real, but second chances apparently were, and she was not going to waste hers. Thursday afternoon found Isabella standing in a boutique so exclusive that it did not even display prices. Noah had brought her here directly after lunch, insisting that she needed proper attire for Saturday's gala. She felt completely out of place among the elegant mannequins and the sales assistant who looked at her with barely concealed disdain. "Monsieur Wilson, perhaps your companion would be more comfortable at one of the department stores?" the assistant suggested with false sweetness. Noah's expression cooled. "My assistant will be attending the Beaumont Foundation Gala as my professional representative. She requires an evening gown appropriate for the occasion. If you cannot provide that without judgment, I'm certain Maison Laurent down the street will be happy to accommodate us and to earn my business going forward." The assistant's demeanor changed instantly. "Of course, monsieur. My apologies. Mademoiselle, if you'll come this way." An hour later, Isabella stood before a three-way mirror, wearing a dress that made her barely recognize herself. It was a deep midnight blue, elegant and sophisticated without being overly revealing. The fabric moved like water, and the color brought out the warmth in her dark eyes. But the price tag, which she had glimpsed accidentally, made her feel faint all over again. "That's the one," Noah said decisively. "We'll take it, along with appropriate shoes and accessories." "Noah, this is too much." "It's a business expense," he repeated firmly. "You're representing my company. Consider it a uniform." A uniform that cost more than 3 months of her old salary, Isabella thought. But she recognized the futility of arguing. Noah Wilson, she was learning, was accustomed to getting his way, though he wielded his authority with a gentleness that suggested he understood what it meant to be powerless. As they left the boutique, Noah's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his expression shuttered. "I need to take this. Give me a moment." He walked a few steps away, and Isabella could not help but hear parts of the conversation, though she tried not to listen. His voice was tense, strained in a way she had never heard before. "No, father. I already told you I'm not interested in reconciliation. It's been 15 years. You made your choice. Money doesn't fix everything. I have to go." He ended the call and stood for a moment with his back to her, tension visible in every line of his body. When he turned back, his professional mask was in place, but Isabella could see the cracks in it. "I apologize for that interruption. Shall we get coffee?" They ended up in a small cafe tucked away on a side street. Nothing fancy, just honest coffee and pastries. Noah seemed to relax as soon as they entered, as if the simplicity of the place eased something in him. "This was Marie's favorite cafe," he said quietly, stirring his coffee. "She used to bring me here when I was 17, right after she took me in. I was so angry back then, so convinced the world owed me something. She'd buy me coffee and a croissant and let me rant until I ran out of steam. Then she'd ask me one question: 'What are you going to do about it?'" "Wise woman," Isabella said softly. "The wisest I've ever known. She taught me that being a victim was a choice, that I could either spend my life angry at the circumstances of my birth, or I could decide to build something better." He looked up at Isabella. "That phone call was from my biological father. He walked out when I was 3 months old, never looked back. Now that I'm successful, he wants to reconnect. And you don't want to? I don't need to. He's not my father in any way that matters. Marie was more of a parent to me in 5 years than he ever could have been. But he keeps calling, keeps pushing." Noah's jaw tightened. "Some people think money can fix the past. They're wrong." Isabella understood that pain, the pain of abandonment, of being left behind by someone who should have stayed. "My father left before I was born," she offered quietly. My mother never talked about him, but sometimes I'd catch her looking at old photographs with this expression of such sadness. I used to wonder if she still loved him, even after everything. Do you ever want to find him? No. He made his choice. My mother and I made ours. We survived without him. She paused, then added, though I confess there are moments when I wonder who I might have been, if things had been different, if we'd had money, if she'd had access to better health care. She might still be alive, Noah finished gently. I understand that pain. The what-ifs are the hardest part. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, two people bound by similar scars. Finally, Noah spoke again. The gala on Saturday is for the Beaumont Foundation, the educational charity I told you about. We provide scholarships and mentoring for kids aging out of foster care. It's the most important work I do, more important than any business deal or property investment. It's a beautiful legacy for Marie. It's what she would have wanted. She believed everyone deserved a chance, no matter where they started. He smiled, but there was sadness in it. You remind me of her sometimes. That same quiet strength, that determination to keep going no matter what. Isabella felt her cheeks warm. I'm not strong. I fainted from hunger, remember? Being strong doesn't mean never falling down. It means getting back up. You've been knocked down by life more times than anyone your age should be, but you're still standing, still fighting. That's strength, Isabella. The words touched something deep inside her, some wounded place that had never quite healed. She blinked back sudden tears. Thank you, she whispered. They finished their coffee and headed back to the office. The rest of the week passed in a blur of work and preparation. Isabella spent her evenings researching the various charities and causes that would be represented at the gala, memorizing names and faces of important donors and partners. She wanted to be useful, to prove that Noah's faith in her was not misplaced. Saturday arrived with nervous anticipation. A stylist came to Isabella's apartment, another of Noah's arrangements, to help with her hair and makeup. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the elegant young woman staring back. The girl who had fainted in the cafeteria seemed like someone from another lifetime. Noah picked her up at 7 in a car that was somehow both understated and obviously expensive. He wore a tuxedo that made him look like he belonged in a classic film, sophisticated and commanding. But it was the way he looked at her when she emerged from her building that made Isabella's breath catch, a flash of something in his eyes that went beyond professional appreciation before he carefully shuttered it away. You look beautiful, he said simply. Ready? Terrified, she admitted. But ready. The gala was held in a historic mansion that had been converted into an event space. Chandeliers dripped crystal light over guests in evening wear. Champagne flowed freely, and the air buzzed with conversation and laughter. Isabella felt overwhelmed by the opulence, but Noah's steady presence beside her kept her grounded. He introduced her to a dizzying array of people, business partners, fellow philanthropists, politicians and celebrities. Isabella focused on remembering names and details, making mental notes of promises and commitments Noah made throughout the evening. She was so focused on her job that she almost forgot to be nervous. You're doing wonderfully, Noah murmured during a brief moment of privacy. I've received 3 compliments on how organized I seem lately. Apparently, my reputation for chaos preceded me. I'm glad I could help. You've done more than help. You've transformed my entire operation in less than a week. I don't know how I functioned before you arrived. Before Isabella could respond, a woman in a stunning red dress approached. She was perhaps 40, beautiful in a sharp, predatory way, and she looked at Noah with an intensity that made Isabella uncomfortable. Noah, darling, I've been looking everywhere for you. The woman touched his arm possessively, completely ignoring Isabella. We need to discuss the partnership proposal I sent last week, perhaps over dinner next week? Veronique. Noah's tone was polite, but noticeably cool. I haven't had time to review the proposal yet. Isabella, my assistant, will coordinate with your office to schedule a meeting. Veronique finally looked at Isabella, her gaze assessing and dismissive in equal measure. Assistant, how quaint. She turned back to Noah. I was hoping we could discuss it privately, like old times. Old times are past, Veronique. If you'll excuse us, I need to speak with the foundation director. As they walked away, Isabella felt Noah's tension. An old friend, she asked carefully. An old mistake, he corrected. We dated briefly 2 years ago. She was more interested in my bank account than in me. I ended it, and she's never quite accepted that. She seemed very determined. Noah laughed, some of the tension easing. That's a diplomatic way of putting it. Don't worry about Veronique. She's harmless, just persistent. The evening continued with speeches and presentations about the foundation's work. Isabella found herself genuinely moved by the stories of young people who had been given opportunities through Noah's charity, kids like him, like her, who had needed someone to believe in them. During the final speech, Isabella glanced at Noah and saw tears shining in his eyes as a young man spoke about how the foundation had funded his engineering degree and changed his life. Noah wiped them away quickly, but not before Isabella saw the depth of emotion there. This man, who commanded boardrooms and built empires, cried over the success of a foster kid he had probably never met. The contradiction, or perhaps the harmony, of it touched her deeply. After the gala, Noah drove her home. They sat in the car outside her building, neither quite ready for the evening to end. "Thank you for tonight," Noah said. "You were perfect, professional, intelligent, and you remembered every single person I introduced you to. I'm impressed. I was just doing my job." "No." He turned to face her, and in the dim light of the car, his expression was serious. "You went far beyond your job. You made me look good, yes, but more than that, you understood what that evening meant. When that young man spoke about the foundation changing his life, I saw you tearing up too. You got it. You understood why this matters." Isabella felt her throat tighten with emotion, because it could have been me. If someone hadn't given me a chance, I'd still be in that cafeteria, or worse. And if someone hadn't given me a chance, I'd probably be in prison or dead. We're both products of unlikely grace, Isabella. That's a powerful bond. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither was quite ready to name. Finally, Noah cleared his throat. "I should let you get some rest. I'll see you Monday." "Monday," Isabella echoed. She climbed out of the car, but before closing the door, she leaned back in. "Noah, thank you for everything, for seeing something in me that I couldn't see in myself. You've always had it, Isabella. You just needed someone to help you recognize it." That night, lying in bed in her narrow room, Isabella replayed the evening in her mind. The gala, the beautiful people, the important conversations. But what stayed with her most was the moment in the car when Noah had looked at her like she was something precious, something valuable. It was dangerous, this feeling growing inside her. Noah Wilson was her employer, her benefactor, the man who had saved her from destitution. Any romantic feelings would be inappropriate, unprofessional, and ultimately doomed. He existed in a world of wealth and privilege, while she was still just a girl from nowhere with nothing but her determination. But her heart, it seemed, did not care about logic. And as she drifted off to sleep, she could not stop herself from remembering the warmth in his eyes when he looked at her, the gentle way he spoke her name, the tears he had shed for strangers who reminded him of his younger self. Noah Wilson was a good man in a world that had not always been good to him, and Isabella, despite all her efforts to guard her heart, was falling for him. The following week brought new challenges and new revelations. Noah seemed to trust her with increasingly important tasks, managing sensitive correspondence, attending meetings to take notes, even offering opinions on business decisions. He valued her perspective, he said, because she saw things from angles his other advisors missed. "You haven't been shaped by privilege," he explained one afternoon. "You understand what matters to people who are struggling because you've been there. That's invaluable insight. But with increased responsibility came increased proximity, and Isabella found it harder and harder to maintain professional distance. She noticed small things, how Noah rubbed his temples when stressed, how he always made sure she ate lunch, how his entire demeanor softened when he spoke about the foundation work. She also noticed how other women looked at him, beautiful, accomplished women from his world who made Isabella feel invisible by comparison. Women like Veronique, who called the office regularly with transparent excuses to speak with Noah. "She's persistent, I'll give her that," Noah muttered after the third call in 1 week. "Isabella, please add her number to the list of calls you screen." "Gladly," Isabella replied, perhaps with more feeling than was professional. Noah glanced at her with amusement. "You don't like her. It's not my place to have opinions about your personal acquaintances, sir." "We're back to sir now? Must be serious." He was teasing her, she realized. "Come on, out with it. Why don't you like Veronique?" Isabella chose her words carefully. "She treats people differently based on their perceived status. When she looks at me, she sees someone beneath her notice. When she looks at you, she sees an opportunity. Neither perspective reflects well on her character." Noah was quiet for a moment, then smiled, a genuine, delighted smile. "You're absolutely right. Marie would have liked you. She had the same gift for seeing through people's pretenses straight to their truth." The comparison made Isabella's heart swell with pride and pain in equal measure. To be compared to the woman who had meant so much to Noah felt like an honor she had not earned. As the days passed, Isabella began to glimpse the loneliness beneath Noah's success. He worked long hours, attended endless social obligations, but seemed to have few genuine friendships. His phone rang constantly with business calls, but rarely with personal ones. He lived in a beautiful penthouse apartment. She had been there once to drop off forgotten documents, but it felt more like a hotel suite than a home. Expensive and elegant, but empty of warmth. One evening, working late on an urgent proposal, Noah ordered dinner to be delivered to the office. They ate together at the small conference table, the city lights twinkling below them. "Do you ever get lonely?" Isabella asked, then immediately regretted the personal question. "I'm sorry, that was inappropriate." "No, it's a fair question. And yes, I do get lonely." He set down his fork and looked out at the city. "Success is a strange thing. I have everything I thought I wanted when I was 18 and sleeping rough. Money, influence, respect. But somewhere along the way, I forgot to build a life alongside the business. I have colleagues and associates and business partners, but very few true friends. And romance." He shook his head. "Every woman I've dated has either been intimidated by my wealth or attracted to it. I've never been certain anyone saw me rather than my bank account." "Veronique certainly sees your bank account," Isabella said, then clapped her hand over her mouth. "I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have—" But Noah was laughing, real laughter that transformed his face. "You're absolutely right. God, it feels good to hear someone say it plainly. Everyone else tiptoes around these things, but you just cut straight to the truth. It's a terrible habit. My mother used to say I had no filter. It's refreshing. In my world, everyone has multiple filters. You're like a breath of fresh air, Isabella Brown." Their eyes met across the table, and the moment stretched. Isabella saw something in his gaze that made her pulse quicken. Interest, attraction, a mirror of her own growing feelings. But then he looked away, breaking the spell. "We should finish this proposal," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "It's due tomorrow." They worked in silence after that, but something had shifted between them. A line had been approached, if not crossed, and Isabella knew, with a certainty that terrified her, that she was no longer just grateful to Noah Wilson for giving her a job. She was falling in love with him, and that was a complication neither of them could afford. 3 weeks after the gala, Isabella's carefully constructed walls began to crumble. It started innocently enough. Noah asked her to accompany him to Beaumont-sur-Loire for a foundation site visit at a youth center they were funding. The irony of returning to her hometown was not lost on Isabella, though she said nothing about the personal significance of the trip. They drove through the French countryside on a crisp autumn morning, the landscape painted in golds and russets. Noah had insisted on driving himself rather than using a company car with a driver. and the intimacy of the enclosed space made Isabella hyper-aware of every breath, every gesture. "Tell me about growing up here," Noah said as they approached the small town. "What was it like?" Isabella hesitated. She had spent months trying to forget Beaumont-sur-Loire, but as the familiar streets came into view, memories flooded back. It was beautiful and suffocating in equal measure. Everyone knew everyone else's business. My mother cleaned houses for the wealthy families on the hill, and I was always aware that we were the charity cases of the town. That must have been hard. It taught me resilience and humility, though at the time I just felt ashamed. She pointed to a small house with peeling paint. "That's where we lived. 3 rooms, a roof that leaked in winter, and a garden my mother tended like it was paradise itself." Noah slowed the car, studying the house. "Do you want to stop?" "No," Isabella said quickly. Too many ghosts lived in that house. Her mother's cough that had worsened each winter, the empty refrigerator she had tried to hide from her friends, the night she had found her mother collapsed in the kitchen and known, somehow, that their time together was running out. "There's nothing there for me anymore." But as they drove away, she felt Noah's hand briefly cover hers in a gesture of comfort. The touch lasted only a moment, but it seared through her like fire. The youth center visit was emotionally overwhelming. Teenagers who reminded Isabella of herself, bright, hungry for opportunity, trapped by circumstance, surrounded Noah with questions and hope. He answered each one seriously, never condescending, always treating them as the valuable individuals they were. "You were one of them once," Isabella observed during a quiet moment. "You still are in some ways." "We never stopped being who we were," Noah replied. "Success doesn't erase our history. It just gives us the tools to make peace with it." One girl, perhaps 16, approached Isabella shyly. "Excuse me, mademoiselle, are you Monsieur Wilson's wife?" The question startled a laugh from Isabella. "No, I'm his assistant." "Oh," the girl looked disappointed. "You look at him like my mother looks at my father, like he matters more than anything." Isabella felt her cheeks burn. Was she that transparent? "He's a good employer. He's changed my life." "He changes everyone's life," the girl agreed. "That's what makes him special. He sees us as people, not problems." After the visit, as they drove back to Lyon, Noah was uncharacteristically quiet. Isabella finally broke the silence. "What are you thinking about?" "That girl who asked if you were my wife, and how for just a moment I wished you could have said yes." The words hung in the air between them, dangerous and thrilling. Isabella's heart hammered in her chest. "Noah, I know. It's inappropriate. You work for me. The power dynamic makes any relationship between us problematic at best, exploitative at worst. I've lectured myself about this every night for the past 3 weeks." He gripped the steering wheel tighter. "But I can't stop thinking about you, Isabella, about the way you see the world, the way you see me, not as a wealthy man or a successful businessman, but as a person." "I do see you," Isabella whispered. "I see someone who cries at foundation speeches and remembers what it means to be hungry. Someone who drives 2 hours to visit teenagers in a youth center because he remembers being one of them. Someone who is kind and generous and lonely and trying so hard to honor the woman who saved him." Noah pulled the car over to the side of the road, into a small parking area overlooking a valley. He turned to face her, his expression raw with emotion. "I'm falling in love with you. I've been trying not to, trying to maintain professional boundaries, but I'm failing spectacularly." "I'm already in love with you," Isabella confessed, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I've been fighting it too, telling myself it's just gratitude or some kind of misplaced hero worship, but it's not. It's real, and it terrifies me." "Why does it terrify you?" "Because people like you don't end up with people like me. Because I have nothing to offer except a damaged heart and a history of poverty. Because I'm afraid you'll wake up one day and realize you deserve someone from your world, someone accomplished and sophisticated and—" Noah silenced her with a kiss. It was gentle and fierce at once, a question and an answer, a beginning and a homecoming. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "You are the most accomplished person I know," he said fiercely. "You survived poverty, grief, and hunger, and you emerged with your kindness intact. You could have become bitter, but instead you remained compassionate. Don't ever diminish what you've overcome or who you've become." Isabella felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "I'm afraid. I'm so afraid of losing this, of losing you. Then we'll be afraid together, but we'll also be brave together." He cupped her face in his hands. "I don't want to be your employer anymore, Isabella. I want to be your partner, in business, in life, in building something beautiful from our broken pieces. What about the power dynamic? What will people say?" "I don't care what people say, but if it makes you feel better, I'll hire someone else to be my assistant. You can move to a different role in the company or start your own venture with my backing. Whatever makes this relationship equitable and right." Isabella laughed through her tears. "You've thought this through. I've thought of little else for weeks. I even called my therapist to discuss the ethics of it." "You have a therapist?" "Of course. Growing up in foster care leaves scars. I've been working through them for years." He smiled ruefully. "I'm not as put together as I appear, Isabella. I have my own demons, my own damage. This wouldn't be a fairy tale romance where I rescue you. It would be two wounded people choosing to heal together." "I don't want to be rescued," Isabella said firmly. "I want to be loved, seen, valued for who I am, not for who I might become. Then let me love you. Let me see you. Let me value every part of you, including the scars." Noah kissed her again, softer this time. "We'll figure out the logistics. We'll make sure everything is proper and ethical. But please, Isabella, don't walk away from this because you think you're not enough. You're everything." They sat in that car overlooking the valley as the sun began to set, holding each other and making whispered promises. Isabella felt something inside her shift, a fundamental change in how she saw herself and her place in the world. Noah's love did not save her, but it showed her that she was worth saving, that she had already saved herself through sheer determination and courage, and now she could choose to share her life with someone who honored that strength. But reality intruded when they returned to Lyon. Veronique was waiting in Noah's office, having charmed her way past building security. She stood as they entered, her expression shifting from smug satisfaction to fury when she saw their intertwined hands. "So the rumors are true," she said coldly. "The great Noah Wilson is slumming with his secretary." "Get out," Noah said quietly, but there was steel in his voice. "And don't ever speak about Isabella that way again. This is pathetic. She's using you for your money. Can't you see that? She's playing on your savior complex, making you think she needs you." "I said get out." Noah's voice cracked like a whip. "And you're no longer welcome at any of my properties or events. Consider our business relationship terminated." Veronique's face twisted with rage. "You'll regret this. I'll make sure everyone knows that Noah Wilson can be manipulated by any pretty face with a sob story. Your reputation, my reputation, will survive. Will yours?" Noah moved to his desk and pressed a button on his phone. "Security, I need an escort for someone who is no longer welcome in this building." After Veronique was removed, still hurling threats and insults, Isabella sank into a chair. "She's going to make trouble. Let her try. The only people whose opinions matter to me are the ones who know my character. And if others want to judge me for falling in love with a remarkable woman, that says more about them than about us." But Isabella could not shake the unease that had settled over her. Veronique's words had struck a nerve, not because they were true, but because they reflected fears Isabella had not fully acknowledged. What if people did think she was using Noah? What if they saw her as a gold digger, a con artist, preying on a wealthy man's loneliness? Over the next few days, her fears seemed to materialize. Whispers followed her through the building. Some colleagues who had been friendly now looked at her with suspicion or contempt. An anonymous email arrived at her work address, calling her vile names and accusing her of seducing Noah for financial gain. Noah was furious when he found out. This is harassment. We'll find out who's responsible and terminate them immediately. That will only make it worse, Isabella protested. It will look like you're protecting me because of our relationship, which will confirm their suspicions. I don't care how it looks. No one treats you this way while I have the power to stop it. They argued about it late into the evening, their first real conflict. Isabella wanted to handle the situation quietly, to prove herself through work and time. Noah wanted to use his authority to crush the gossip immediately. Neither would budge. "You're trying to save me again," Isabella finally said, exhausted. "But I don't need saving from mean words and jealous colleagues. I need to prove myself on my own terms. And I need to protect the woman I love from cruelty she doesn't deserve. Then trust me to protect myself." Isabella's voice cracked with emotion. "I've survived worse than office gossip, Noah. I survived poverty and hunger and homelessness. I can survive this too. But I need you to believe that I'm strong enough to fight my own battles." Noah stared at her for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "You're right. I'm sorry. I'm so used to solving problems with money and authority that I forgot the most important thing, respecting your agency and your strength." He crossed to her and took her hands. "What do you need from me? Stand beside me, not in front of me. Love me, but don't shield me from every difficulty. Trust that I'm resilient enough to weather storms." She squeezed his hands. "We're partners, remember. That means we face things together, not with you constantly protecting me." "Partners," Noah repeated, as if testing the word. Then he smiled. "I like the sound of that." They found their rhythm over the following weeks. Isabella moved to a new role in the company, head of community outreach for the foundation, a position that utilized her unique perspective and allowed her to work independently. The gossip gradually died down as people saw her competence and dedication. And slowly, grudgingly, even some of her harshest critics began to respect her work. But the experience had left its mark. Isabella understood now that loving Noah came with challenges that had nothing to do with their feelings for each other. His wealth, his status, his world, all of it would always be there, creating barriers and assumptions. She would have to be stronger, work harder, prove herself more thoroughly than anyone else just to be seen as legitimate. "Is it worth it?" she asked Noah one night as they lay together on the sofa in his apartment, watching the city lights twinkle below. All the judgment, the whispers, the constant need to prove we're genuine. Noah pulled her closer. "You're worth it. We're worth it. And someday, when we've built a life together that's undeniably real and good, no one will remember the gossip." He kissed the top of her head. "Besides, I've weathered worse storms. So have you. We can handle this one together." Isabella closed her eyes and let herself believe him. They were both survivors, both fighters, and maybe that was enough to build something lasting, something real. But in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that the hardest challenges were still to come. 6 months after that conversation, the storm Isabella had sensed on the horizon arrived with devastating force. It came in the form of Noah's biological father, Richard Wilson, who appeared at the foundation offices on a grey March morning with lawyers, reporters, and accusations. Isabella was in a meeting with potential donors when Francine from HR burst in, her face pale with distress. "Isabella, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation with Noah. His father is holding a press conference downstairs, and it's bad." They rushed to Noah's office, where he stood at the windows with his shoulders rigid, watching the scene unfolding on the street below. On his computer screen, a live feed showed Richard Wilson, an older man with Noah's features worn by dissipation, speaking to a cluster of reporters and cameras. "My son has cut me out of his life completely, refuses to help his own father who is struggling financially. He's forgotten where he came from, forgotten that family should matter more than money. And now he's taken up with some gold-digging girl, young enough to be his daughter, throwing away his values for—" Noah slammed his laptop shut, his jaw clenched so tight Isabella feared he might crack a tooth. "He's broke. gambled away whatever money he had, and now wants me to bail him out. When I refused, he threatened to go public with lies about our relationship, Isabella. Said he'd paint you as a manipulative opportunist who seduced me for money. Let him, Isabella said calmly, though her heart was racing. Let him say whatever he wants. The truth will speak for itself. You don't understand. He has photos he's doctored, emails he's fabricated. He's claiming you approached me with a sob story, that you deliberately engineered our relationship for financial gain. Noah turned to her, and she saw fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for her. He's going to try to destroy you to get to me. Then we'll fight him together. Isabella moved to stand beside Noah at the window. I'm not afraid of lies, Noah. I'm afraid of letting fear win, of letting someone like him determine how we live our lives. Francine cleared her throat. The Foundation's board is requesting an emergency meeting. They want to discuss potential damage control. The meeting was brutal. Some board members stood by Noah unquestioningly, but others expressed concerns about the Foundation's reputation. One particularly pompous man suggested that Noah should distance himself from Isabella publicly until the scandal died down. Absolutely not, Noah said flatly. Isabella is the head of our community outreach program and one of the most valuable members of our team. She's also the woman I love. I'm not distancing myself from her to appease gossips and liars. But Noah, another board member interjected, you must consider the Foundation's mission. If donors withdraw support because of negative publicity, then we'll find new donors, better donors, the kind who care about the work we do rather than tabloid nonsense. Noah stood, commanding the room. I built this foundation to honor Marie Dubois, who taught me that character matters more than reputation. She would be ashamed of me if I abandoned someone I love because it was convenient. If any of you disagree, I'll accept your resignation from the board immediately. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, one by one, the board members nodded their acceptance, all except the pompous man, who stood and stormed out in a huff. Good riddance, muttered Francine, but the crisis was far from over. Richard Wilson's press conference spawned dozens of articles and social media posts. Strangers who knew nothing about Noah or Isabella felt entitled to judge their relationship. Old photos of Isabella from her cafeteria days surfaced online, with cruel captions about her transformation. Anonymous comments called her every vile name imaginable. The night after the story broke, Isabella sat in Noah's apartment staring at her phone, reading the endless stream of hatred directed at her. Noah found her there, tears streaming silently down her face. I'm ruining everything, she whispered. Your reputation, the Foundation's work, all because I was selfish enough to fall in love with you. Noah took the phone from her hands and set it aside. Then he knelt in front of her, taking her face in his hands. Look at me. You're not ruining anything. My father is a bitter, destructive man, trying to tear down what he could never build himself. His lies have no power except what we give them. But what if donors do leave? What if the Foundation suffers because of me? Then we'll rebuild. Isabella, when I was 18 and sleeping on the streets, do you know what kept me going? The knowledge that I was more than my circumstances, more than what people assumed about me. You taught me that same lesson all over again when we met. You showed me that dignity and worth aren't measured in bank accounts or social status. He pulled her close, and she buried her face in his shoulder. I don't know how to fight this. I don't know how to prove we're real. We live our truth, we do the work that matters, and we love each other openly without apology. Noah pulled back to look at her. I have an idea, but I need to know you're with me, completely, always. The next day, Noah called another press conference. Isabella stood beside him, her hand in his, as cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions. Noah raised his hand for silence. My father has made serious allegations about Isabella Brown and about our relationship. I'm here to address them directly. Yes, Isabella and I are in a romantic relationship. Yes, she started as my employee, but the story my father told is a malicious fabrication designed to extort money from me. He pulled out a folder of documents. These are Isabella's employment records, showing her exemplary performance and promotions based solely on merit. These are testimonials from foundation beneficiaries about the incredible work she's done in community outreach. These are financial records showing that she has never accepted any personal gifts or money from me beyond her salary and standard business expenses. And these, he held up another set of papers, are the emails my father sent me demanding money and threatening to expose my relationship if I didn't comply. The crowd erupted in questions, but Noah continued. I'm not asking anyone to take my word for it. I'm providing evidence. Isabella Brown is one of the most dedicated, compassionate, and hard-working people I've ever met. Our relationship is based on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine love. If anyone has a problem with that, they're welcome to direct their concerns to me personally, not to hide behind anonymous comments and lies. He turned to Isabella. I also want to say something directly to you, right here, in front of all these witnesses. Isabella Brown, from the moment you walked into my life, you've made me a better man. Not because you tried to change me, but because you saw who I really was beneath the armor I'd built. You're my partner, my best friend, and the love of my life. Then, to Isabella's shock, Noah dropped to one knee, pulling a small box from his pocket. I wasn't planning to do this in front of cameras, but maybe that's fitting. Let there be no doubt, no questions, no room for lies. Isabella, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner in building a life that honors both our struggles and our strengths? Isabella's hands flew to her mouth as tears poured down her cheeks. The cameras continued flashing, but she barely noticed. All she could see was Noah kneeling before her with his heart in his eyes, offering her not rescue but partnership, not charity but love. Yes, she whispered. Then louder, yes. He stood and swept her into his arms, kissing her while reporters shouted questions and cameras captured every moment. It was public and messy and completely imperfect, and absolutely perfect at the same time. The footage went viral, as Noah had probably anticipated, but this time the narrative shifted. People began investigating Richard Wilson's background, uncovering a history of fraud and manipulation. Supporters of the foundation came forward with their own testimonials about Noah's character and Isabella's dedication. The tide of public opinion slowly turned. Richard Wilson, faced with evidence of his extortion attempt and the overwhelming support for his son, disappeared as suddenly as he had appeared. Noah's lawyers ensured he would face consequences for his fraudulent documents and threats. But more importantly, something fundamental had changed. Isabella no longer felt like she was constantly defending herself or proving her worth. Noah's public declaration had freed her from the weight of others' assumptions. She was simply Isabella Brown, soon to be Isabella Wilson, a woman who had survived poverty, loss, and cruelty, and emerged with her kindness intact. The foundation not only survived the scandal, but flourished. Donors who had been on the fence were inspired by Noah and Isabella's story. New supporters emerged, touched by the authenticity of their journey, and the young people the foundation served saw in them a different kind of success story, not rags to riches, but broken to whole. 3 months later, they married in a small ceremony in Beaumont-sur-Loire, in the garden behind the house where Isabella had grown up. They had bought the property and lovingly restored it, transforming it into a community center for at-risk youth, a place where Isabella's mother's memory lived on in service to others. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. Former foundation recipients served as ushers. Francine stood as Isabella's maid of honor. And though Marie Dubois could not be there physically, her presence was felt in every detail, in the kindness of the gathering, in the focus on community rather than spectacle, in the understanding that true wealth had nothing to do with money. As Isabella walked down the makeshift aisle in a simple white dress, she thought of all the twists that had brought her to this moment, the hunger and desperation that had led her to faint in a cafeteria, the stranger who had seen past her circumstances to the person she could become, the hard-won lessons about worth and love, and the difference between being rescued and being valued. Noah watched her approach with tears in his eyes, this man who had built an empire but still remembered what it meant to be powerless. When she reached him, he took her hands and whispered, "Thank you for saving me." "We saved each other," Isabella whispered back. The officiant spoke of love and partnership, of two people choosing to build something beautiful from broken pieces. When it came time for vows, Noah spoke first. "Isabella, you taught me that vulnerability is not weakness, but courage, that accepting help is not defeat, but wisdom, that love is not about rescue, but about recognition, seeing someone fully and choosing to stand beside them. I vow to be your partner, not your savior, to support your dreams, not direct them, to love you not despite your scars, but because they're proof of your strength." Isabella's voice shook as she responded, "Noah, you showed me that my past does not define my worth, that kindness is not foolishness and hope is not naive. You gave me not a handout but a hand up, not charity but opportunity. I vow to be your equal, not your project, to challenge you when needed, support you always, to build with you a life that honors where we've been while celebrating where we're going." They exchanged rings, simple bands inscribed with the words, "Partners in everything," and sealed their promises with a kiss that felt like coming home. The celebration that followed was filled with laughter and joy. Isabella looked around at the gathered crowd. Foster kids Noah had mentored, families from the community center, colleagues who had become friends, and realized that this was what wealth really meant. Not money or status, but being surrounded by people whose lives you had touched and who had touched yours in return. As the sun set over the garden, Noah pulled Isabella aside to a quiet corner. "Happy?" he asked softly. "Happier than I knew was possible," she admitted. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is real, that I get to spend my life with you." "Believe it. We earned this, Isabella. Every moment of happiness we earned through survival and resilience, and refusing to let pain destroy our capacity for love." He kissed her forehead. "And this is just the beginning. We have so much work ahead. The foundation is expanding. We're opening 3 new community centers next year, and someday, maybe, we'll fill that house with children who will never have to wonder if they're loved." Isabella leaned into him, feeling his heartbeat steady against her cheek. "Children who will know that circumstances don't determine destiny, that broken doesn't mean worthless, that love is real and second chances exist." "Exactly." Noah tightened his arms around her. "We'll show them by example. 2 people who could have become bitter but chose hope instead, who found each other at our lowest points and lifted each other up." They stood there as night fell, surrounded by the sounds of celebration, wrapped in each other and in the knowledge that they had not just survived their pasts, they had transformed them. Every hardship, every loss, every moment of hunger or loneliness or despair had led them here, to this garden, to this love, to this life they would build together. Isabella thought of her mother, who had sacrificed everything to give her daughter a chance at something better. She thought of Marie, who had saved Noah when he was lost, and she understood that love was not a transaction or a rescue, but a choice, a daily decision to see someone's worth and honor it, to accept help when needed and offer it freely, to build together something stronger than either could create alone. "I love you," she whispered into the twilight. "I love you too," Noah replied. "Today, tomorrow, and all the days after, partners in everything." Yay! And as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky above Beaumont-sur-Loire, Isabella Brown Wilson understood the greatest lesson of all, that healing was not about erasing scars, but about learning to wear them with pride, that love was not about being saved, but about being seen, and that sometimes the most beautiful endings came from the most broken beginnings. Wadi Epilogue. 2 years later, Isabella stood in the main hall of the Marie Dubois Youth Center, the newest addition to the Foundation's network, watching as teenagers filed in for the evening's mentorship program. Some looked defiant, others hopeful, all of them carrying the weight of difficult circumstances on shoulders too young to bear such burdens. She saw herself in every one of them. "Ready?" Noah appeared beside her, carrying a stack of folders. At 35, with silver threading more prominently through his dark hair, he was even more handsome than when they had met. But it was the softness in his expression when he looked at the young people that truly transformed him. "Ready," Isabella confirmed, touching the small swell of her abdomen where their first child grew. They had not planned to start a family quite so soon, but life had a way of writing its own timeline. "Do you think they'll listen to us? Some will, some won't. But we'll plant seeds just like Marie did for me, just like I tried to do for you, though you were already growing just fine on your own." He smiled at her. "You just needed better soil." The session began with introductions. Isabella shared her story, not the sanitized version, but the real one. The hunger, the fainting, the shame of poverty, and the fear of homelessness. The teenagers listened with increasing attention, recognizing their own experiences reflected back at them. "I'm not going to tell you that everything will be easy if you just work hard enough," Isabella said honestly. "Life isn't fair, and hard work doesn't always guarantee success. But I will tell you this, your circumstances don't define your worth. Your past doesn't dictate your future, and accepting help when you need it isn't weakness, it's wisdom." A girl of about 16 raised her hand tentatively. But how do you know when someone is genuinely trying to help versus just wanting something from you?" It was a question Isabella had asked herself many times. You listen to your instincts, but you also take calculated risks. When Noah offered me a job, I was terrified it was too good to be true. But I also recognized that staying where I was meant certain failure. Sometimes you have to trust that there are good people in the world, even when your experience has taught you to be cynical. Noah took over then, talking about the practical aspects of building a life, managing money, pursuing education, developing skills. But he kept circling back to the most important lesson, that they were not alone, that the foundation existed to provide not handouts, but opportunities, not charity, but partnership. After the session, several young people lingered to ask questions. One boy, rail-thin and wearing clothes too large for his frame, approached Isabella hesitantly. "Did you really faint from hunger?" he asked quietly. "I did. It was one of the most humiliating moments of my life, but it was also a turning point. Sometimes our lowest moments crack us open to let in the light." "I'm hungry a lot," the boy admitted, his voice barely audible. "I work after school, but the money barely covers rent for the room I share with 3 other guys. I keep thinking about dropping out to work full-time, but I don't want to give up on finishing school." Isabella's heart clenched with recognition. She knelt down to meet his eyes, an awkward maneuver with her pregnant belly, but important. "What's your name?" "Luke." "Luke, I want you to take this." She pulled out a foundation voucher for the community center's food program. "This gets you 2 meals a day here, no questions asked, and I want you to come talk to me tomorrow about our work-study program. We can help you find better-paying work with flexible hours that won't interfere with school." "Will you do that?" Luke's eyes filled with tears. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." "Because someone helped me when I was exactly where you are, and because you remind me that this work, this foundation, exists for real people with real needs, not just abstract concepts of charity." She stood, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Come tomorrow, Luke. Let us help. You don't have to do this alone." Now, as Luke left, clutching the voucher like a lifeline, Noah wrapped his arm around Isabella's waist. "You're going to save that kid." "No," Isabella corrected gently. "We're going to give him tools to save himself. There's a difference." They locked up the center and drove home through the quiet Lyon streets. Home was no longer the cramped shared apartment or even Noah's sterile penthouse. They had bought a comfortable house in a neighborhood that mixed old and new, wealth and middle-class practicality, a place that felt like them, neither ostentatious nor austere. The nursery was nearly finished, painted in soft yellows and greens. Isabella stood in the doorway, one hand on her belly, imagining the life that would soon fill this space. Scared? Noah asked, joining her. Terrified. What if I'm a terrible mother? What if I repeat my mother's mistakes, working myself to exhaustion, trying to provide? You won't, because you have something your mother didn't have, a partner, resources, and a community of support. Our child will never wonder if they're loved or if there's enough food. They'll grow up secure, but we'll make sure they understand their privilege and their responsibility to others. Isabella turned to face him. Do you ever regret it? Taking a chance on a starving girl in a cafeteria? Your life would be so much simpler without me. Simpler, maybe. Better, never. Noah cupped her face in his hands, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. You wrecked me in the best possible way, Isabella Wilson. You cracked open my carefully controlled life and reminded me why I built the foundation in the first place, not as a memorial to Marie, but as a living expression of the belief that everyone deserves a chance. We both deserved a chance, Isabella murmured, and we both took it. That's the real lesson, isn't it? That opportunity plus courage equals transformation. Marie would have loved you so much, Noah said softly. She would have seen in you what I see. Strength disguised as fragility, courage dressed in humility, and a heart that refuses to harden despite every reason it should. They stood together in the doorway of their future child's room, two survivors who had found each other at precisely the right moment, not to rescue one another, but to recognize in each other the reflection of their own resilience. Outside, lions sparkled with evening lights. Somewhere in the city, Luke was probably going to bed hungry but hopeful, clutching a voucher that represented more than just meals. It represented possibility. And in countless other places, other young people were fighting battles similar to the ones Noah and Isabella had fought, waiting for their own moment of grace. Do you think we're making a real difference? Isabella asked, voicing the doubt that sometimes crept in during quiet moments. With the foundation, with all the programs, are we actually changing lives, or are we just putting band-aids on systemic problems? Noah considered the question seriously. Both, probably. We can't fix broken systems overnight, but every individual life we touch matters. Every Luke, every girl like you were, every angry teenager like I was. They're not statistics or case studies, they're people. And if we help them survive long enough to discover their own strength, then yes, we're making a difference. I want our child to understand that, Isabella said, her hand protective over her belly. I want them to grow up knowing that they're privileged, but also knowing why that privilege exists, because we survived and fought and refused to let pain make us cruel. I want them to use their advantages to lift others up, not to build higher walls. They will. Because they'll learn by watching us. Noah kissed her forehead. Come on, Mama. You need rest. Tomorrow's a big day. We're announcing the expansion of the scholarship program, and I need my brilliant partner to help me not sound like a pompous billionaire. Isabella laughed. You could never sound pompous. You cry at graduation ceremonies. Those kids work so hard. How am I supposed to not cry? As they settled into bed that night, Isabella reflected on the strange and winding path that had brought her here. If someone had told her 2 years ago, when she was fainting from hunger in a cafeteria basement, that she would end up here, married to a man she loved deeply, carrying their child, running programs that changed lives, she would have thought them delusional. But life, she had learned, was full of unexpected grace. Full of moments when strangers became saviors, not by rescuing but by recognizing, full of second chances and new beginnings, of scars that became sources of strength rather than shame. Noah, she whispered into the darkness. Thank you for seeing me. Not the girl I was or the woman I could become, but exactly who I was in that moment, broken and hungry and still fighting. Thank you for letting me see you. for trusting me with your truth and your pain and your remarkable, indomitable heart. He pulled her closer. We're going to be okay, Isabella. All of us. You, me, this baby, and every kid who walks through the Foundation's doors. We're all going to be okay. And wrapped in his arms, listening to his steady heartbeat, Isabella believed him. Because they had already survived the worst life could throw at them. They had already proven that love was not about perfection, but about choice. The choice to see value in brokenness, to offer help without diminishing dignity, to build something beautiful from the shattered pieces of their pasts. Their story was not a fairy tale about a prince rescuing a pauper. It was something better, a true story about two wounded people who chose to heal together, who transformed their pain into purpose, and who proved that the greatest love stories are not about saving each other, but about recognizing in each other the courage to save themselves. As sleep finally claimed her, Isabella smiled. Tomorrow, she would wake up beside the man she loved. Work that mattered would fill her day, and somewhere in Lyon, a boy named Luc would eat breakfast without hunger gnawing at his belly. It was not perfect, but it was real, and it was beautiful, and it was theirs. And that, Isabella understood, was the truest happy ending of all. The end.